Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Red Lines, a show where we dive into daring subjects and cross some red lines of political speak. Today, with me, I have Joe McDonald and Paul Smith, and we're going to be talking about, well, none other than Trump's peace plan for Ukraine.
Hi, my name's Joe McDonald. I'm British and a volunteer with the 124 Brigade 196 Battalion down in Kherson. I'm a sapper. Sometimes I fly drones, and I also do a bunch of organisational and fundraising work for the battalion.
Awesome.
My name's Paul Nuckenfutz Yori Smith. I am an American. I lived in Ukraine since 2012. I was fighting. I was preparing and fighting for this war long before even the events in 2014. A lot of you guys know me from my other content, my YouTube and Instagram. I'm currently back here in the United States. I own and operate a manufacturing company that I put on hold while I went out into Ukraine back in 2022 and 2023 to fight. And now I'm back here manufacturing equipment for Ukraine.
Awesome. So, what the three of us are going to be discussing today is Trump's, or I guess alleged Trump's, peace plan for Ukraine that was leaked by one of his advisors, which, I mean, Trump and his administration have said that this is not a real plan and this is not a real advisor. He was just a contractor. But, anyways, it's out there in the world, and there have been comments made because of this plan, and there have been a lot of things kind of happening and being said because this alleged plan leaked. So here is the plan for the people that might not have heard it. Step one of this plan is that Putin gets all of the territory that he already holds, which is not going to even work for, it's not going to work for Ukraine, but it's also not going to work for Putin because he, in his constitution, he's already ratified that the territories of Ukraine that he doesn't even hold are the territories of Russia. So he obviously wants more. There are also comments that have been made by that same advisor telling Ukraine to forget about Crimea because Crimea is long gone and to focus on what's realistic. So that's part one of the plan. Part two is a demilitarized zone enforced on the territory of Ukraine, not the territory of Russia. 1,200 kilometers of demilitarized zone along the front line. So this demilitarized zone is going to be enforced not by the American military, but by French and German military, and they're going to be forced to enforce the zone, and they're going to be forced to pay for it, which, as I've said many times before, gives me the Mexico is going to pay for the wall vibes. And then the third part of this plan is that Ukraine is not allowed to join any defensive alliances, including NATO. So at first it was just NATO, and now it comes out that it's any defensive alliances. The EU is considered a defensive alliance in this scenario for the next 20 years, which is not going to work for Ukraine. Because of these comments, there have already been a lot of different. So, because of this plan, there have been a lot of different comments made by, for instance, Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs that, the US is going to figure out what to do about the Ukraine situation this week or next, as if Donald Trump has any power of signing any capitulating or otherwise documents for Ukraine. So, I would like to remind all of the viewers that, yes, Donald Trump has the power to withhold aid. Elon Musk has the power to shut down Starlink. And Elon Musk and Trump were on a call with Zelensky recently, allegedly, which also blows my mind because Elon Musk is not an elected official and should not have anything to do with any phone calls with any politicians. But alas, there is this plan. Trump has no prerogative to sign any capitulation or otherwise documents for Ukraine. The president of Ukraine is Zelensky, and that's the only person who can sign these documents. And Trump can, withhold aid. Trump can severely damage Ukraine. Trump can do whatever, Trump can completely remove America from an ally list of Ukraine. But what he cannot do is he cannot decide for Ukraine whether we are giving up or not. So what are your guys' thoughts on this?
Okay.
Please go first, Yori.
All right. So other than the fact that it is going to be just shutting off of USA, that's the only thing he can really do. He can also possibly restrict U.S.-made components, which is basically everything in the Western military sphere, use in Ukraine. through its allies. So it could tell, the reason why we can't use Storm Shadows, even though Britain said go ahead in Russia, is because there are components in the missile that are made in the United States, and the United States has since said no. So the U.S. can do things such as that and say, hey, if it has U.S. components in it, there's limited to restricted use, even though it came through a ally. But all that's going to do is really rub the rest of the allies, the U.S. allies, the wrong way. That's really the only power that Trump does have in the say of what happens with Ukraine. But if he did want to end this war quickly, because he keeps bitching about, like, every time Zelensky comes to the United States, he gets like 200 billion and goes back to Ukraine. We just sent over 500, Washington and Germany just did some sort of deal where 500 Patriot and NASAMS missiles were fast tracked to getting into Ukraine. Those are only treating the symptoms, not the underlying cause. So if Trump really wanted to end this war really quickly in Ukraine, is straight up to just authorize long reach, being able to strike within Russia, because Ukraine already has all of the targets that they want to hit. That's the places that are producing the cruise missiles, the ballistic missiles, the Shahid drones that Russia is producing. We saw just recently Ukraine sent a drone into the Caspian Sea, taking out the Caspian Sea flotilla. There's a couple of port facilities in the Caspian Sea that unload the missiles that they get from Iran. Now that Israel has actually hit Iran's missile production facilities, that might not be as much of a top priority target anymore. And then also the airfields that are launching these glide bombs. So the airfields where the Su-35s and stuff are stationed, if we're able to hit those, the U.S. really would not need to keep sending as much military aid as they've been sending to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
That would probably be a more likely and favorable outcome to ending this war quickly, where Trump can save face and still be part of this Western international coalition, and really just continue on allowing America to be the leader of the free world.
I think whatever happens, whatever the, obviously, as we said, as you said, it's an advisor who apparently didn't have the right to say that sort of thing. What the plan actually is, I'm pretty confident that Putin's not going to stick to it,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what's going to backfire and put egg on Donald's face at the end of the day. And I think that might be our saving grace. My other hope is that at the end of the day, for America, this whole situation is geopolitics. And for Europe, it's a very, very real problem. If Ukraine actually falls, all of it or even half of it, if the orcs are across the Dnipro and they've taken Kyiv, and maybe only Lviv and the Galician and Lviv regions still stand, then Poland, Romania, the Baltic states, Finland, Britain, France, Germany, well, pretty much they're all going to have to reintroduce national service, mobilization, conscription, call it what you will. They're all going to have to dramatically increase the amount they spend on domestic military spending, which is going to cost a hell of a lot more and be way more unpopular than any aid that they could give to Ukraine. I mean, if I was emperor of the world, you know what I'd do? Get rid of NATO. It's not useful. It's a shackle around the necks. I mean, if it wasn't for NATO, I'm pretty sure the Poles would already be in the fight. So would the Baltic states. The French, if it wasn't for NATO, the French would be willing to send troops to close off the Moldovan, Belarusian border. Baltic states could actually take over checkpoint duty and stuff in the middle of Ukraine. They speak a Slavic language, good enough, and that could free up Ukraine's military massively. So, we'll see what happens. But Trump's made grumbles about leaving NATO, and I, as much as I like America and have many American friends, I don't think Europe really needs America to win this fight. France and England have their own nuclear deterrents. France, England, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Holland have all got very strong defense industries and can make everything we need. So perhaps there'll be a great division, but I don't think that the idea that if Trump stops sending the HIMARS and the money, that Ukraine's just going to go, okay, we're done, and Europe's going to agree. I don't think that's going to happen. I can't see that happening in any plausible reality.
Well, I think if there was no NATO, the Baltic states would be involved, but I don't think in the way that you think they would have been. They're much smaller. They're on the border of Belarus, and I think that Russia would have already rolled through them already before even Ukraine.
If there was no NATO, yes, but if there was a great schism within NATO now, is more what I meant.
Yeah.
But,
So I agree with the fact that NATO is an outdated alliance, and NATO was created 100 years ago, right? And it was a different world then. And
no, it was created post World War II. So I think we're at 80 years or something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're correct. Well, thank you for correcting me, but yes, basically almost 100 years. But the thing is, we're in a very different world now, and I think that NATO is not useless as a deterrent, but NATO is useless in terms of what they were created for in a way. I do think that NATO's policies have sort of, at its inception, it was a defense alliance, and now it's a mitigation alliance that's very scared of escalation at any point. I don't think they do a lot of defending. I think they do a lot of sort of, in their own view, repelling, but that's not necessarily how it works. I think that because of NATO policies and because of NATO being scared of Russia, this war has gone a lot further than it would have and should have.
Well, it's only a couple actors in NATO, so United States and Germany for one. Poland,
The
all
richest.
the way back. What's that?
The richest actors with the most say.
Yeah, and the most technologically advanced systems. But in 2014, Poland just immediately jumped in with aid straight to Ukraine while everybody else was still trying to figure out what to do. So there are some actors within that. There's France, and then Britain has actually been amazing in just the overall levels of aid and the equipment that they sent over, right? So I remember when Storm Shadows first came into Ukraine, they're like, hey, let's figure out how to launch these off of Soviet airframes. Then you got the Netherlands, and who else gave F-16s to Ukraine? And it was just basically, oh, here, let's give Ukraine all these older F-16s. It should have been, the United States leading this call to arms, not only just through the treaty that they signed back in the 90s when Ukraine disarmed from its nuclear missiles. And a lot of people don't understand, it wasn't just nukes. It was the ballistic systems to launch said nukes, and as well as the bombers that Ukraine had to drop nukes. But, the United States, when it was doing nuclear de-escalation with the Soviet Union and then later Russia in the 80s and 90s, they just reclassified their bombers that were designed to drop nuclear weapons as heavy bombardment aircraft. And then they got to keep the B-52s, the B-1s, the B-2s.
Well, there
and
is
that's
also a false
something. What's that?
there is a false belief that I actually learned about recently that I wanted to bring up here because you reminded me, is that a lot of people think that Ukraine got compensated for denuclearizing because there was money given to Ukraine involved in Ukraine giving up nukes. We were not compensated for giving up nukes. It was the offset of the cost of destroying a lot of those nukes and
Yeah.
sending a lot of them to Russia. So it's not like we sold the nukes and made profit out of that. No, no, no. We came out into like we broke even, and that's the whole point, because we should not be tasked with offsetting the cost of something that's actually detrimental to us, not helpful.
No,
So
Yeah.
there's that.
people don't think many people. I mean, you run a manufacturing plant. I used to work in heavy industry. If you shut down a big plant, it costs a lot of money. You know, so the
Mhm.
same with decommissioning nukes. You know, you can't just put them on a truck and ship them off. There's a lot more steps than that.
Oh yeah, and it's the same thing that like I tell people when they're like, "Oh, we keep giving Ukraine so much money," and I was like, "We give them old stuff, like all the javelins that I fired while I was in Ukraine. All of their dates were back when I was in high school. They were made back in the early 2000s when I was in high school, and I was like, these missiles are cut. One of them even failed to launch too, by the way. So these weapon systems that we're sending out to Ukraine, they're at the end of their serviceable life. They're about to get shipped to a facility to be destroyed, and each of those weapon systems are costing taxpayers money to disassemble them safely. So, and we're not in the
We've all
Middle
got
East. We can't. What's that?
we've all got a bunch of stories like that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Any guys like when we were in the Legion, the first machine guns they gave us were not MG3s, they were actual MG42s, and they had a big fucking number painted on the top. So this has been like the machine gun in some fucking training battalion. I think they were, I can't remember if they were Italian or Yugoslavian, but they'd been rechambered for 7.62 NATO, and they had big numbers painted on the top. Like one of the things ran sweet, the rest of them was like an actual MG42. I mean, it's an expensive machine gun because it's a fucking museum piece. You know what I mean? But it shouldn't be. It's old. I'm 40, and it's older than me. It was older than the lieutenant colonel who was there. You know, we had PVS. Sorry.
Yeah, continue. I was going to say my Browning, the first one that you guys all saw me shouting for ammo and using my multi-tool to open up that top cover. Some guys reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, can you give us the serial number?" Because it was an AC spark plug Browning. I gave them the serial number. It was produced in 1943 or 1944.
I like to say to the people that scream that my taxes are going to Ukraine, I like to tell them that their grandfather's taxes are actually going to Ukraine because that's when all of this stuff was manufactured, and that's when the taxes to manufacture it were collected. Your taxes are not actually going to Ukraine. Your taxes are producing more better weapons for America and creating more jobs in America.
Yeah.
That's an interesting part to it.
Like even stuff perceived as more modern, like the PVS 31s we were in the Legion, they were all like, missing the rubber seals. Like the one of my first scariest moment in Ukraine was thinking I was about to get my throat cut by like some kind of special forces raiding team because it was a moonless night and we're in the forest, it's pitch, you can't see your hand in front of your face, these things are blinking on and off, and it's a fucking deer. There's a great big deer that's just walking up on my position. I'm like, I'm gonna fucking die. I'm gonna fucking it's a fuck. It was only the snort of the pouring of the ground that made me, oh fuck, it's a big Carpathian deer that's just taken an interest in why is this dude in a hole? But like when we got them, we're like, oh god, this is like fancy American stuff. We're like, nah, it's the one that every recruit at Fort Bragg has picked up, dropped, fallen over with it on his helmet and banged on the ground. That's what we got sent,
Yeah.
Speaking of weapons, I think one of the Sorry, may I just
Yeah,
I
go
think
go.
because you guys brought up weapons, and the fact that they're old, and I then brought up that new weapons are being manufactured. So because new weapons are being manufactured, and because the reality is that war is profitable for America, because America is one of the largest producers of weapons of war in the world, I think Trump actually cannot forcefully force Ukraine to capitulate, because American defense manufacturing companies have a lot of lobbying power. One of
Mm.
the things that
Mhm.
we can probably all agree on that Trump is interested in his presidency is lining his pockets, is not going to jail and lining his pockets. I do not think it has anything to do with making America great again, or the American people, or literally anyone other than Donald Trump. So one of the things that he can't afford to do is piss off the American manufacturers of defense equipment, because they would be losing a lot of money if none of these old weapons are going to Ukraine, and they don't have to produce new weapons for Europe. The scenario in which, let's say, he removes the sanctions off of Russia and starts selling weapons to Russia, that actually means the fall of NATO, and I think Europe will turn around on America and will go a completely different direction, because Trump removing sanctions off of Russia and selling, because this is a narrative that I'm already foreseeing people saying, okay, if he's not doing this to Ukraine, he can remove the sanctions, he can sell it to Russia, Russia can buy enough to compensate for the whole of Europe and the rest of the world remilitarizing. Sure. But that creates a very, very different picture of power struggles and dynamics in the world, where I do not think America is going to be a Western ally. And I do
Mm.
not think Europe is not going to turn around onto America if Trump literally starts selling weapons to Russia.
Patton would spin in his grave. When he
Yeah.
first got elected, I had this moment where I remembered the Eisenhower speech where he talks about the danger of the defense, the industrial military complex, and shadowy figures behind the US presidency and American democracy. And I was like, I'd just like to take a moment to thank those shadowy figures behind American democracy for keeping us safe. Because, yeah, the game show and the WWE wrestling style politics, it's really starting to fucking backfire here, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully the shady man who shot Kennedy will keep us safe from the Orange Man.
When a lot of people who keep going back to the people saying about I'm sick and tired of my tax dollars going out to Ukraine, like I used to have to always explain it to them. I was aware of Russia's plans, Putin's plans back in 2008, before the Georgian invasion. And in my videos and stuff, a lot of people watch. I've actually started putting equipment in Ukraine in 2010. Moved to Ukraine after I got out of the U.S. Army in 2012, and I was training Ukrainians back in 2012 and 13, even before um, the events in Kiev happened in 2013, 2014. So, and I keep telling these people that back in 2008, Bush had the opportunity to nip this in the butt, and he did not. Like, it would have cost a bit of pain then, but not nearly as much as what it does now. Then again, in 2014, the United States could have acted under Obama a lot quicker. And then when the guys are like saying, "Oh, Trump's going to shut down," money to Ukraine, and Zelensky's going to lose his payday, and everybody's all laughing and smug. I was like, you don't understand that Trump went against Obama's policies in 2018 and started sending lethal aid to Ukraine, javelins and stingers. And I got a ton of these Bentronic chargers still downstairs. I bought hundreds of these things and rechargeable javelin batteries, and I sent them out to Ukraine back in 2019 and 2020, to my guys, to my Ukrainian friends out there who was doing a lot of training with javelins. That's why when I got to Ukraine, I was only a handful of Western volunteers that actually knew how to use the Javelin missile system. I was even training people in the Legion as well as in the Ukrainian army how to use these weapon systems. So, um, you know, Trump had also started, since he went into office, was increasing um, military aid spending to Ukraine during his first 4 years. So the way that one of the things that I do see Trump doing is he's not going to shut off the taps to Ukraine, which is literally going to stop hundreds of thousands of jobs that are in the United States that was created since 2022. I got manufacturers that I used to work with. They would outsource me parts. They would have me manufacture these parts on my machines, and then I send it to them. They had a government contract or whatnot. They would check the parts to make sure that they were in spec, and then they would just pass it off to the government or to whomever they got the contract from. So, viewing how stuff is manufactured here in the United States, being a part of I used to be a part of a large manufacturing company that had government contracts. We did, before the spear, the SIG spear was created, we did all the we were one of two companies that did the handguards for that rifle. So, like I was able to see how, these larger companies would filter parts down to these smaller and smaller companies because either they didn't have the capabilities or they just didn't have the time or the need or the want to do this small part. And a lot of these components require documentation, verifying that they're not being produced out in like China or India or somewhere. And these same companies are coming up to me and they're like, even while I was in Ukraine, some of them didn't even know I was in Ukraine fighting. I get an email on my work email and they're like, hey, do you have any capacity open right now? We got these parts. We need like 80,000 of these small parts. Can you help us out with some of these things? I'm like, I'm kind of not in the country right now. I'm actually out doing other things at the moment. So, that whole ecosystem that's been created, that whole network that's been created since 2022, Trump shuts that thing down. A lot of his voters are working in states, Texas, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Florida, even here in California, even though it's a lot of the shops are in blue areas, a lot of those people that work in these machine shops and these manufacturing plants actually live outside of the blue cities, and they live in predominantly Republican voting areas. So he's not going to shut that down. He might repackage these aid, because a lot of this aid that's going to Ukraine, some of it comes in the form of like zero interest loans and loans with criteria. He might like repackage it and say, oh look, I signed a $30 billion deal with Ukraine to send them more bullets for their war, but we're making $30 billion off of this deal. Look how great this is. This is great for America, and that's what's going to happen. But if he really wants to go further into this and say, hey, Sleepy Joe didn't want them to use weapons. How do you fight a war without attacking the enemy's supply chain? So we're letting them use long-range weapons to hit these factories, and they can bring this senseless war to an end and stop all the killing, which Trump says that he wants. But again, it's what he says during his campaigning versus what actually happens when he is in office. Like I remember, he was talking about, the first day one, we're going to repeal Obamacare. We're going to have something better and beautiful for Obamacare. Everything that was suggested was worse than Obamacare. And, the news just quietly just stopped talking about that. And it's not just that, the wall, Obamacare, those are the only two examples I have off the top of my head. But if I actually just really sat down and thought about the 2016 election, I could probably come up with some more things that he had.
Well, yeah, he says a lot of things and then he doesn't really do that. Here's the thing. The negative things he says he does, he actually ends up accomplishing. The positive things he says he'll do, he doesn't end up accomplishing.
All frozen?
No, we're not frozen.
I'm still good.
Okay. So the negative things that he says he's going to accomplish, he does end up accomplishing in the states where there are MAGA officials at the helm of the state. The positive things, however, he does not seem to manage to accomplish. So I actually always find it very amusing when people tell me, "Oh, Trump says a lot, but then none of it comes to fruition." And it's like, no, it doesn't come to fruition on a federal level.
I mean,
You
it's the
yeah.
easy things that he can get done, that he gets done. But if it's a large, complex issue like immigration reform, um,
Yeah. Well,
American healthcare, it's going to be something that he's going to try to do, and then he's not going to be able to do it. With all the times that the 3 times I've been in DC, I specifically spoke with Republican lawmakers in both the House and the Senate, talking to them regarding, continuing on aid and stuff like that. And some of them are kind of scared. A lot of them that I've spoken to that have signed these bills, they're like, yeah, we understand the importance. And then there's the few that are like, well, I don't sign this bill because he's up for reelection, or he's, you know, Trump. If you fall out of graces with Trump, he just tries to destroy you, politically. He just wants to cancel the people that he sees doesn't go along with him, and we might see a bit of that too coming up. But then there's still a strong opposition, because a lot of these, senators, they understand what's going to affect their bottom lines and stuff too.
Well, which in itself, alone in itself, it's crazy that there is, the president that just removes people that don't agree with him and destroys them
Hmm.
politically. But, that's not the topic of today's conversation,
No.
fortunately or unfortunately. I think fortunately, because any single time anyone asks me to talk about anything Trump related, I'm like, do you really want me to do that? Are you sure? But yeah, there is a lot of policy that was enacted in states where his loyalists are presiding. And I think one of the things that people are forgetting is that this time around, he has the House, the Senate, the White House, and the court. Because the court is absolutely stuffed with MAGA Republican judges. So this is going to be very interesting. In terms of the peace plan for Ukraine, I just don't think Trump can afford to stop giving Ukraine support, and I don't think he can afford to have an alliance with Russia. First of all, there are people who are like, "Oh, Putin respects Trump. Oh, Putin is scared of Trump." It's so funny to hear that Putin does not respect anyone and Putin is scared of no one. He's especially not scared of Trump. There is this perception within America of Americans that people around the world respect Trump, while most European countries, both citizens and politicians, consider him a clown. No one's scared of him. And that's just the bottom line. And neither is Putin. Also, Putin doesn't respect him. Putin just thinks that he could be useful to Putin. Putin is keeping a short leash with people that he can use. So Trump falls into the category of people that Putin considers potentially to be useful. My other thing is, and this is completely conspiratorial, is that one thing that Trump doesn't like doing is Trump doesn't like returning money and paying back loans. We know this, we've seen this. If there is any sort of money for any sort of election help or for any sort of influencers that were pro Trump, that were talking up Trump to win, if there is any Russian money that went to Elon Musk or anything like that, and I'm not talking about stolen election or anything, I'm talking about if there is any world in which Trump owes Putin money through third, fourth, fifth, sixth parties, there is not going to be any sort of Trump Russia alliance, because one thing that we know for sure is Trump does not pay his loans back. So it's probably going to be a lot more beneficial for him to keep backing Ukraine than to go along with Russia, simply because it's cheaper.
It's
Yeah.
also sorry. I was going to end with one more thing that I had just kind of got in my last rant. One of the other positive things that Trump will be doing is, increasing drilling of American gas and natural resources here in the United States, which is going to drive down the cost globally, which, it is going to hit Putin's pocketbooks regarding his natural gas and oil revenues, which is going to help exacerbate the issues that they're having in Russia regarding the Russian economy. And for those people who keep looking at the numbers that the Kremlin puts out regarding their economy, is like, oh, look, it's increased its GDP this year over last year, and the ruble's still strong. What they don't understand is, at the beginning of the war, I remember friends of mine in Ukraine who have family members, like even just like parents, grandparents in Russia, who were saying, "Oh no, this isn't like," they're not attacking Ukraine, they're attacking the political system. Everything's going to be okay when Putin gets in. Don't worry about it. And these people are like, no, they're bombing our schools, they're bombing our churches, our hospitals, and these parents and stuff saying, everything's going to be fine. I had just talked to some of my friends who had talked to their parents after, several months of not speaking with them. Everything that their parents are saying now about Russia regarding the economy, regarding stuff there, is like, one of the grandparents hasn't gotten their pension in such a long time, that they're relying on friends and family to just be able to eat and heat their house. So, there's what Putin wants the world to see his country is like, and then there's the truth of what it's actually like from the people's perspective. When I was traveling around Ukraine twice in 2010, the first time I was not really preparing for the war. I was traveling around Ukraine. I was talking to just the people, hanging out with the people, and getting their feel. That's actually what caused me that in my second trip to Ukraine, at near the end of 2010, after the elections, I had actually brought 2 duffel bags worth of military supplies, and I started storing them in Ukraine, and then it just escalated from there to what I had before 2022.
I just had an image of what's the film with Arnold Schwarzenegger where he's got the 4-tube rocket launcher at the start of the film. The colonel comes up to tell him, "We need you back," and he's just got that gun room. Basically, I've just got an image of one of these little Ukrainian cottages somewhere, and you with just the Rumo guns, basically. Something
on my YouTube stories, or not stories, on my YouTube channel, there's a "Why I'm Fighting in Ukraine," and there's actually a photo of one of my storage facilities, and it's just floor to ceiling with boxes, Pelican crates, tough boxes. All of that had gear and stuff in it. There was another one that I had that had just duffel bags. All those duffel bags. There was a duffel bag filled with nothing but pants. There was a duffel bag that was filled with nothing but grenade pouches. There was a duffel bag filled with nothing but magazine pouches. That's actually where my nickname Yori comes from. It comes from the Nicolas Cage character, Lord of War. Well, when I was in the Legion, at the very beginning of the war, none of the Legion guys had magazine pouches. They didn't have grenade pouches. I had this SCAR, I had a suppressor, I had a thermal scope, I had a laser, I had a light mounted on it. They're like, "Where did you get all this stuff? Like, how much stuff did you bring in?" I was like, "I only came into Ukraine with a backpack. Everything that you see here has been in Ukraine for the last decade." And they're like, they wanted stuff, and I started putting out like, "Hey, what do you guys need? What do you guys want? And what do you guys would like?" And then I started getting all that stuff for them. I had just passing out ammo pouches and grenade pouches to these guys. Some guys paid for suppressors. I had a contact with guys where we were getting suppressors for like 10 American dollars each. And they were running them on their weapon systems. And then, if individuals had the money, because ACOGs and aim points, and this is really before US aid came in with ACOGs and aim points and stuff like that. There were ACOGs and aim points that collectors and other people had here in Ukraine that I was able to get to these guys. And they're like, "You're like the Lord of War." And I was like, kind of jokingly saying, "Yeah." And then some people didn't know the reference. So we watched the movie Lord of War. And that's actually where Yuri and Yuri Blatt came from, was from that movie.
I was wondering, because I've watched some of your content, but you normally I've never, you're normally kind of obscured by camouflage and dirt and stuff like that. But I was like, your name's Yori, but you don't look very Ukrainian. I'm going to guess maybe like Portuguese ancestry or something. You remind me of an American fellow called John from Boston, John Silver. But yeah, anyway, now I know. Thanks for telling me.
Well, I don't, I don't have a lot to add here other than I agree with both of you, and I mean I agree with a lot of these assessments. I think my only worry with Trump and his peace plan is the fact that it definitely includes Elon Musk, who again is not an official and is not an elected official, is also not a politician. Somehow he is while he's been paying people $1 million to vote for Trump, let's say it the way that it is, right? It's veiled quite a bit, but that's what he did. He's also been buying out lots of town halls and squares and just campaigning for Trump and just putting a lot of money into Trump winning, and also used X as a platform to spread pro-Trump messages with manipulating the algorithm. So Trump has a big advantage in terms of what he wants to do here through Elon Musk and Starlink, because if Elon Musk shuts down Starlink, that's a collapse of the Ukrainian front line very quickly because no internet.
I've already got my bones with him. There was that incident last year where Ukraine Special Operations, Navy, whatever bits were responsible for the sea drones were going to do a big attack on Crimea, and they requested for Starlink to be turned on, and he didn't just say no, he turned it off for like the entire Southern Command area. We didn't have our Starlink working in Kherson for months after that, and that cost lives. That cost lives. That's why one of the reasons I got a stinking TBI, because we have to have loads of guys come and set up Wi-Fi at our positions, way too much signature. Next thing, they're pinging 152s off the side of the building. And now I get frustrated in the supermarket, and stuff like that. So yeah, I've already got my bones with Elon. I've also got my speculations about him. Do you know that, like, interesting thing that I learned from Elon Musk? Russia, up to SpaceX, Russia makes the best rocket engines. NASA buys Russian rocket engines. I wonder how many Russian rocket engineers are employed at SpaceX. I wonder if you looked into that company, how deep the link goes between the Russian military and space program and SpaceX. I wonder indeed.
A lot of the engineers for Russia's rockets and ballistic missiles actually came from Ukraine. Ukraine was a country that manufactured a large portion of the components. That's why that Satan II ballistic missile that exploded a couple months back, Russia was touting as, oh, this is a Russian design, Russian built missile system. That's also why it probably exploded. But in Donetsk, or not Donetsk, Dnipro, it's a huge missile manufacturing hub. It was also one of the areas I was considering even back before, like, we knew that Dnipro would more or less be safe due to the size of the front lines down near Avdiivka and Pokrovsk and stuff. But I was considering moving my factory out to even that location before the war started, and then reconsidered having it still in the Lviv area. But in Dnipro, I had more access to a lot more engineers and a lot more manufacturing space than I do in Lviv. So
yeah, they just make croissants there,
Oh, Lviv croissants? They're not even made in Lviv, I don't think.
No, they are made in Lviv, but it's kind of like, I don't know, all foreigners absolutely adore and love Lviv croissants, and we in Lviv, provided that there is actually a lot of very good food in that city. And as like a person coming from Lviv, this is probably the worst thing that has ever come out of Lviv. But I mean, like, if you compare it to Wendy's or something, sure, it's fantastic. But but in reality, essentially, it's just really bad fast food. I mean, it's better fast food than like most places, but it's just fast food. And we as Lviv people absolutely freaking hate that that's called Lviv croissants, and that's the first thing people bring up when they talk about Lviv, because this is by far the most garbage food that you can find in Lviv. But back to our conversation. Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, I think my only worry is Elon Musk, because he could do a lot of stuff and he could turn off Starlink, and that, if anything, would greatly impact the front.
Well, I think he's thinking he's going to get a deal with Russia because in the east of Ukraine there are large lithium mines there, and I think he's thinking he's going to be able to capitalize off of Russia's being able to mine out all this lithium and sell it to him at discounts. I don't think that's going to be the case, in the terms of Ukraine being able to give up this and allow Elon to have um, these resources. Also, as I see it right now, Tesla stock has been down. The whole Cybertruck thing was a fucking nightmare, and I think
Oh,
there's a lot of things that Elon's just trying to do to relatively stay relevant in this world right now. Because if I do get an electric vehicle, it's not going to be a Tesla. I don't have to choose that choice. There's actually a lot more
Rivian.
better electric vehicles out there on the road. Like if I want an electric truck and I had the money to blow, I would definitely get either a Lightning or a Rivian. So,
And they're just
and I
generally
can,
better vehicles, especially for the price for what they are. Yeah, I
oh
mean,
yeah,
Elon
not
Musk's
just better.
businesses are suffering. The issue with Elon Musk is that, as much as Trump, he's a fraud, right? Like,
Mhm.
there is this idea that Trump was a successful businessman, but in reality, it was just the TV show The Apprentice that marketed him as a successful businessman, while all of his businesses were failing, and he was the only millionaire that had time to film a TV show. Which, guess why? Because he was actually not doing any of the actual business. Elon Musk bought a lot of businesses and hired a lot of smart people and portrayed their ideas as his own. But in reality, he's also a fraud with a lot of money, right? And I think that the issue for him is that while his liquid assets are multiplying for like Bitcoin and whatever, his actual companies are not performing as well as they're supposed to. And most of the companies that he is at the head of, they're losing money for years in a row now, and nothing he does fixes it. There was the issue with Tesla cars, where he priced them down to the point where at first they were just not worth the money he was selling them for. People were livid because they were buying these $100,000 vehicles that were literally not better than a Toyota Corolla, just electric. Then he sold a bunch of vehicles and priced them down the next year, like what, 1/3 or something like that, for $30,000. So the people that had just bought these vehicles a year before for $100K were pissed off because now their vehicles are depreciating in value. So he's been doing a lot of really crazy stuff for the past couple of years that's really not benefiting him. And I mean, I have my ideas as to why, but this is not the
Ketamine is
topic.
a hell of a drug.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you for picking it up. Thank you for picking it up where I couldn't. But yeah, so I do think that maybe he needs, a retreat from the world and kind of go find himself somewhere, maybe in Thailand without internet for a while. And maybe just give Starlink to Ukraine, But yeah, but I don't know. I think that Trump is not going to completely abandon Ukraine, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's financially not feasible for him. And it's not feasible for his presidency and for all of the ways that he's planning on making money off of being president. Elon Musk, however, well, having Elon Musk in his ear is probably not a great thing. That's where my
Elon Musk is Elon Musk, but he isn't the military industrial complex. All I can hope is Trump's going to make some emperor-like demand about what the situation is. Putin's not going to listen, and he or his troops are going to violate that. And then hopefully, the tap, which has been on a trickle through the whole Biden administration, gets fully opened up. That would be my best hope. Because, yeah, America's sent a lot of aid, but it's also been revolving more door money in some cases. Like, we pay for the satellite data. I've seen what satellite data we get from America. It is nowhere near the high grade of sat data. It's the low grade. High grade sat data, you can see through people's fucking windows. This is like, yeah, there's a house there. You know, you can drop an artillery shell on stuff, but it ain't the best. You know, we got, how many Abrams did they send? Like 30? What fucking good is that? What's the fucking point? I mean, Britain only sent 20 Challengers. That's one of my shames of my country, you know? Like, HIMARS. Yeah, HIMARS were one of the only times a weapon were the title that the press love using, game-changing for a bit. But, like, speaking as someone who works with drones and cooperates with other long-range drone teams and gets to see a pretty comprehensive intelligence view of what's happening on the southern front, there's been so many times we've been, look, there's fucking loads of them. There's fucking loads of them in that forest. Can we have a HIMARS? Nah, sorry, they're all busy. Yeah, we don't. We could kill like 200 infantry and 20 fucking vehicles in that spot, but we can't spare the HIMARS. And it's like, for fuck's fucking sake. Do you know how frustrating that is? When you're like, oh my God, they're just sat there. They haven't even dug in. They're just camping in the fucking forest 30 kilometers back thinking they're safe, and we ain't got the weapons for it. So, we'll see. We'll see. I hope that the tap will actually open, because Putin is not going to do what Trump says, and his army aren't exactly the most obedient and well-behaved at the end of the day. So let's hope. There's always hope. And past hope, there's bloody mindedness and grim determination. Have you frozen, Yori? Or are you just like...
No, I'm here. I'm just listening.
Very still.
I'm just remembering my time out there, thinking about, we went from reconnaissance to more reconnaissance strike to just straight strike group at the end. And then just thinking about, there were times that we wish we had capabilities that weren't available or weren't, there yet. So,
I mean, it's an anecdote I've told before, but when we first got really shelled, when we got along the river in Kharkiv, no offense, there was American dudes who were shouting, "We need air support," and it's just like, dude, there isn't any. Like, how about mortar? Maybe tomorrow. This we have. Air support? No. HIMARS? No. Artillery? 50-50 blade.
I remember we were doing an assault and we only had 12 120 millimeter mortar shells that they were going to be able to drop. And I was like,
I've been in those. I've always wanted to talk. Situation has kind of improved, but there's been times where we've spotted 6 fucking spats who had drone guns and big eco flows, and they go into this house on one of the islands, and we're like, fucking wind's a bit high for FPV. Let's get the mortars. And one went 20 meters, the other one went 30 meters of the way, the other one got about 10 meters of the house, and we're like, go on, you're almost there. It's like, we're out of shells. We're out. I was like, you only fired fucking 3. It's like, yeah, we literally, we have to keep 10 in case they try and cross the river. We're not allowed to go beneath that. We're out of shells. Fuck's fucking sake. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, But we got him. We got him in the end. Wind dropped, slapped 2 kilograms of plastic explosive onto an FPV and blew the house up. So that was nice.
You guys should have, a conversation on the sidelines of this, because it seems like you have a lot to talk about, which is actually a great time to bring up the fact that Joe here is in Kherson right now, and Yuri used to serve in Kherson, and this is a year, sorry, not a year, it's an anniversary of the liberation of Kherson region, which is, I guess this absolutely does not stick to anything we've said, but it could be a sort of an inspirational little tale that I want to tie up here, is that, we managed to return Kherson. So to anyone who says, oh, Crimea is far gone, or Donetsk is far gone, or Luhansk is far gone, it's not far gone. Nothing's far gone if you have the right weapons for it. The thing is, we have the strategy, we have the idea of how to do it, we have the knowledge of how to do it, we just don't have the permission to use our weapons the way that they're supposed to be used. And one thing that Donald Trump can do to end this war, as he says, in a very short period of time, well, no one can end it in 24 hours other than Putin taking his troops out of Ukraine. And that's going to take more than 24 hours because there are way too many of those bastards here. But
I mean, they can just leave their stuff and go back.
Yeah.
That would be quick.
Yeah. But the point is that in order for you to end the war in a very short period of time, let Ukraine strike and let Ukraine use the weapons we already have in the ways that we deem appropriate. Because so far, we have not once undermined the Western trust in us and what we do with these weapons, because we're not interested in Russian civilian casualties. We're not interested in, some sort of payback. We're interested in taking back what is ours and freeing our people. Simple as that.
It's funny. I get donations from the channel, and I'm not going to say the name of the company, but I got a donation the other day, and it was $500. So I'm like, that's the kind of thing that makes me look a little bit more at who's sending that. And it was the name of a company. And I've recently started, been on a couple of dates with a girl in Kherson. I've managed to find the one attractive girl in the city who isn't already dating an officer. And I was like, it says it was the name of the company was something to do with clothes. And I'm like, I wonder if they make nice stuff. Maybe I could get the, potential girlfriend something. And I looked, and the company was based in Moscow. So there are some good Russians out there, who definitely are on our side, like just an odd little thing that happened, So yeah, I'll take donations from anyone, Russians, North Koreans, Iranians, anyone who wants to help bring peace to Ukraine by drone warfare. You're more than welcome.
I mean, we were taking donations from the Russians. There's a few stories of us stealing those Hornet missiles, and then a couple tanks we stolen. But we appreciate Russia's donations too to the war effort.
Were you in the Kharkiv counteroffensive?
No, only in Kherson.
It was just
I was only in the Mykolaiv region. What's that?
It was just a ridiculous plunder fest at the end, like a combination of very grateful Ukrainians giving us watermelons and a jika and bread, and just like so much stuff, so much captured weapons. And like, we'd started off with this very neatly organized van, and then you're like in the back doing Twister with like, you let an AGS under one leg, boxes of explosives under the other. It's like we had to chuck some stuff away. We're like 5.45 ammunition out the car. We don't need that. We've got too much of that already. So yeah, it was a biggest donation to the Ukrainian military ever, was them just running away. And well, some of them did fight pretty good. It wasn't a resistless fight, but a lot of them just hightailed and left because Gersey be good at maneuvering troops quietly in large numbers, as he's proven more than once now.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole viral video of me shouting for ammo and firing off those 2 AT-4s from the Humvee, we were supposed to take out a tank that the Russians would park right next to that one house I was firing AT-4s at. We had seen it in a couple of the morning drone reconnaissance videos. They would just park the tank, turn it off, go inside. The whole plan was we were going to drive up with the Humvees. I was going to fire the AT-4s, take out this tank, and then we were going to, shoot up most of this outside of the village and then get out of there after taking out this tank that was giving us such a freaking headache. But, they're not as everybody wants. As people before the war thought it was the second greatest army. I got stories of, we rolling up on Russians sleeping. We used to go into villages at night just to figure out where they were storing their ammunition or where their officers were sleeping so that Ukraine could do artillery strikes, following days. Or we would just plant anti-tank mines in the roadways leading to their trench systems. And we actually ended up blowing up some of their resupply and tanks that were going out there to resupply those trench systems. So
fun doing that. I mean, I do it via large drone, but yeah, it's awful satisfying, you know, worth
I mean,
staying up till the morning watching the Mavic pilot, like, go on,
Yeah.
come down the road, come down. It's safe. You know it's safe. You drove it yesterday and he's gone. Right, let's go
Yeah.
home for some sleep.
Actually, I also have a photo too. We were actually running over a Russian anti-tank mine. Whatever Russian conscript planted this anti-tank mine literally planted it in the middle of the road. So the trucks are going over it all day long. And it was only when one of the Ukrainians kind of noticed, like, the top of the anti-tank mine was there, did we notice that we were driving over an anti-tank mine for like a week that some Russian guy just put in this straight in the middle of this dirt road. So
yeah.
Well, of course, Russians
Thank-
are nowhere near being actually the second best military in the world, and I think that their 3-day warfare not succeeding has proved that more than anything.
I
It's
mean, we're
been
only a
almost
few
3
days off
years.
or a few weeks off of 1,000 days, right?
Yeah, we're also almost 3 years in, so you know that's going to be which is a crazy thing to realize, but clearly their 3-day war turned into a 3-year war going on its fourth soon, unfortunately. And yeah, I do hope that, you know, with this new presidency, maybe, which I'm not going to hold my breath for it, but maybe they'll surprise us and go against Russia, not because it's the right thing to do, but because whatever their own motives might be. But thank you guys so much for having this conversation with me. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on what you think is going to happen under Trump's, I don't know if I want to call it presidency. Is it like kingship? Is it rule? Like what do we call a self-appointed czar?
Well, he wasn't self-appointed. He did win the election, which I
Yeah,
find hilarious to all those people who said that the deep state wasn't going to let him win and that this was going to be fraudulent and all this other stuff. And I was like, I mean, he did win first. He did win and get the popular vote too. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
that one stings. I mean, I didn't mean self-appointed Tsar. He's not a self-appointed. He's an elected president. The Tsar, however, he is self-appointed. I
yeah.
think that his idea of himself is a little inflated.
I wonder if Trump remembers what Putin said, because there's a Putin quote that goes, Donald Trump will say something, I'm going to paraphrase, but Donald Trump will say he will do this and he will do that. And then on his first day in office, when he gets to the White House, he will be taken into a room and some men in suits will explain to him how things actually work. And I'm like, wonder if Trump remembers that, you know? So, yeah.
He likely doesn't. But that's a very amazing quote to bring it full circle. It's sort of like, you know, what's going to happen when Trump takes office to Ukraine? It's sort of like, yeah, no one knows, because he might say one thing and do a completely different thing. But the only thing that I think we can count on is that it's not going to be stable, predictable, or out of the goodness of his heart and understanding of the situation.
Mm.
Well, we can always speculate, and hope for the best. You know, one good thing that did kind of come out of even the first Trump presidency was, and even the threat of this Trump presidency is really Europe stepping up as much as they have in order to provide defense for Ukraine and Europe as a whole, because then they fear that, hey, look, this free ride that we get with the United States might go away or might be restricted in such a way that they now have to consider their economies, their people, in order to continue going on. So, you know, one of the things that reasons why Germany and Japan became such, and even South Korea became such huge powerhouses, was because they were underneath the umbrella of the United States. The United States was taking care of them. They didn't have to have, not talking about South Korea, but Japan and Germany, they didn't have to have the productions that they had, especially in Japan's case, for the war production and the defense production, because the United States was always there, helping them out. So this really was a wake-up call for Europe and the world, that you can't just sit idly by and then just allow the United States to take the reins and do all the heavy lifting for everybody, which I think, in my personal opinion, is a good thing too, because there are a lot of Americans here that are tired of always being the ones providing that aid and security. And these are also the same Americans that don't really understand that the United States doesn't really do UN missions.
Yeah.
And it's all these other third world countries that are sending their soldiers to do these UN missions.
Yeah.
But the United States is paying a lot towards that, and a lot towards the defense and security of these other nations that should be able to put that right. Poland got the idea, and after this war, Ukraine's going to have the same idea too. Like, I'm talking to my friends in the military, in the higher echelons of the Ukrainian military, and it's going to be a thing where Ukraine wants to be a powerhouse of weapon design and ingenuity for the future, because they understand that what Putin's done in Russia with the propaganda he's spread about Ukraine and about the rest of the world, that there are generations of Russians that are going to grow up not fully understanding why their economy is so shit and everybody else around them is doing good. And it's going to be, it's going to be 1930s Germany, but in Russia. So Ukraine, Poland, NATO, the rest of the European Union they're going to have to have a coming to moment and realize that they're going to need to be able to provide their own security and stuff in Europe.
Well, yeah, Europe has to step up, and Europe has to enter wartime economy, and Europe has to put on its big boy pants and sort of be responsible for themselves. I think that's, no matter what Trump does, that's the conclusion that Europe should be following. And I think that Ukraine and Europe in an alliance need to understand that this is happening in our realm of the world, not in the US realm of the world. So it's always going to be secondary to the US, no matter how much they realize that it might lead to World War III, which I don't think they realize we're already there. But I think that's I do want to end this on saying what you said before, is that, Donald Trump says a lot, because the question is, right, like, what's going to, Trump's peace plan and what's going to happen with Ukraine in regard to this peace plan. And I think that's the exact thing, is that Trump says a lot of things, but then we never know what the hell he's going to do. I think the only thing that's certain is that none of it is going to be with good intentions. It's going to be with the intentions of what benefits Trump best. So I guess if Ukraine wants to be supported, Ukraine needs to figure out a way of how Ukraine is more useful to Trump than Russia is. And that's about the bottom line of it.
Well, whatever happens, people like me and a lot of the guys I work with aren't giving up. My officer volunteered to stay behind when Kherson was occupied. He's done some stuff. I'm famous. I can't just move back to London and expect things to be all right. I've made my bed, and so have many of the people I work with. We've been planning for Operation Partisan for months. Many things, some I know about, some things I don't know about, are in place for if things go bad. We're not giving up. We're not going to surrender. We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the streets and the fields and the hills. It's as simple as that. So, war sometimes gets difficult. British Expeditionary Force in the First and Second World War got fucking trounced at the start of it. We basically lost the army and we came back. War isn't a flat plane. There are ebbs and tides. There are peaks and valleys. Maybe we're about to go into a bit of a valley, but I know people who I've spoken to in Kherson who, when the war started, were like, Ukraine's never had the best system of government, since 1991. A lot of people were pretty ambiguous. about what side they were on. And then they were under occupation and are very firmly pro-Ukrainian now, you know? Like, they didn't really know what was happening at first, and then they were under Russian occupation, and their sister or their mate or one of their friends just got disappeared, you know? And that happened a lot in Kherson. Like, I know a lot of people who, whatever happens, aren't going to give up. And that's why I'm proud to fight for the Ukrainians, because they make everything we talk about with Blitz spirit in the UK and our legend of our national character based on the Second World War an actual modern reality. So, yeah, come what may, we're fighting on.
And as a Ukrainian, that's very heartwarming to hear, because, you know, in this time of uncertainty, that's a big deal. So I hope this conversation has given you a bit of a clear idea on what we should be, could be, or might be expecting, even though, you know, it's all 50-50. This is not the kind of presidency that we can prepare for or expect something out of, unfortunately. But anyways, if you would like to hear more conversations like this and you enjoyed this one and you enjoy this channel, please subscribe to this channel. Also, do like this video and send it to a friend. You never know who might also like it. And please do leave a comment with all of your questions, suggestions, and thoughts, because I read all of them and they help me figure out conversations for the future. See you next time.